So, good afternoon, everyone. We are here at the Forest Pavilion for the COP29. I am Helen Magata. I work with Tebtebba Foundation. It's an Indigenous people's organization based in the Philippines. I am from the Kadaklan people of the northern Philippines, and I have here with me.
Yeah, good evening to all of us. My name is Joseph Simel. Joseph Simel from Eastern Africa, particularly Kenya, representing indigenous peoples from the African continent. I'm working with an organization called MPIDO, Mairena Pastoralist Integrated Development Organization. And really my pleasure to get this particular opportunity. And thank you, the Forest Pavilion, for giving us this opportunity really to have this dialogue, which I believe is going to be very useful and very productive for us of indigenous people and beyond, the rest of humanity. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eileen Mairena. I'm an indigenous mosquito from the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. I work for the Center for the Autonomy and Development of Indigenous People in Nicaragua. And I really appreciate the space that we have here in the Forest Pavilion where we can discuss indigenous people issues that are important for this COP. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so this evening we are going to talk about bioeconomy and perspectives of indigenous peoples. What is it about? What do we think about it? What are the experiences of indigenous peoples? And how we can shape bioeconomy so that it brings benefits to indigenous people. So we're going to take turns asking questions to each other, if that's okay. And I'm going to ask you the first question, James.
Yes.
Okay, what for you is bioeconomy? What comes into your mind when you hear the word bioeconomy, and how is this related with, or why is this something that indigenous peoples should be talking about?
Well, thank you very much indeed. Well, it's a very important topic and strategically very imperative at this time in time. Why? Because the world is moving through what they call market oriented to exploit the natural habitat. And sometimes they exploit the natural habitat, but without consultation and without participation of indigenous peoples, and without any benefit in sharing from those where that resource comes from. After saying that, the bioeconomy means simply looking into the plant, looking into the animals or animal products, looking into the ocean or marine products, or looking into the soil. But then bring the knowledge for production purposes of those particular, what you call generic resources, or what you call bioeconomy. And I want to give a very specific example. I come from a continent where, for example, beekeeping is a very important industry. And indigenous people are not benefiting because it requires some technical know-how, it requires some innovation, it requires some packaging, it requires some marketing, which is not available for many indigenous peoples. And that's why multinational companies are doing that instead of indigenous people doing that. And that means we need to change the narrative. And we need to develop a narrative which says indigenous people are capable, indigenous people have innovation, indigenous people just need some technical capacity through financial support, through technology, in order for them to benefit from bioeconomy. what am I saying in conclusion? I'm saying in conclusion generally that I think there's been a lot of exploitation of indigenous peoples. That exploitation has subjected them into extreme poverty and hunger in most cases, because therefore they are not benefiting from their own resources. And I think that's a narrative which we need to change, so that indigenous people can benefit from those resources, but those resources are in their own territories, so they can able to carry industry, carry investments and benefit, and that means generate income, and that income can be invested in other social and economic activities. I don't know if I have answered your question, but basically that is a nutshell of what I can be able to share in relation to, this bioeconomy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I think that's very comprehensive, and it's a very good jump off point to our second question.
Thank you, Joseph, for your presentation. I think I really enjoy every time you talk, because you put everything in a very comprehensive way of saying the things. And
Thank you.
you start talking about that there are processes that start without consultation of indigenous people. And that's also bring to me a couple of questions that I want to ask Helen about what are these concerns that you see, or when we talk about bioeconomy, what are these threats that you see when you hear bioeconomy?
Now, thank you, Eileen. Actually, when I first heard about bioeconomy, I was like, what is that? Yeah, because it's like putting bio and economy. And I have personal biases against how economy is being defined. This is being defined right now by the dominant economy. And the experience so far of indigenous peoples in dealing with the dominant economy hasn't been really very good. It has been very extractive in nature, especially in terms of natural resources. So when we talk about dominant economy paradigm, it has been, again, very extractive and very exclusive in terms of respecting cultures and traditional knowledge of indigenous people. So my concern is that how is traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples going to make into or inform how bioeconomy is going to be defined by indigenous peoples. So there's a lot of examples out there of how indigenous people's traditional knowledge have been misappropriated to make profit and for individual gain. And again, I think also in terms of when we look at the perspective of indigenous peoples versus bioeconomy and dominant market, I think there's a mismatch in terms of values, because indigenous peoples look at nature as, as people, as part of nature. However, I think in many cases, the dominant economy looks at nature as something existing solely to serve the purposes of providing for our needs. And that shouldn't be the case. For indigenous peoples, the forests, the lands, the waters, these are all part of our, identity and spirituality. And if bioeconomy is going to be defined in such a way that doesn't take that into account, then we lose many of the things that we hold dear as indigenous peoples. Then we talk about innovation. I think Joseph had a very good example about this. I was reflecting when I heard about bioeconomy, and when I was reading what it means, I was like, but this is something that indigenous peoples are doing already, right? Yeah. And why is it that we are coining a different term to refer to what is something that's already existing? So maybe in terms of innovation, yes, indigenous peoples have their own innovations, but I'm concerned that when we say innovation, it can mean many things, including innovations which may not be culturally appropriate or acceptable, or innovations that are done that are not according to the process of free, prior, and informed consent. And so we were having a conversation a while ago, and we were saying that, this was called nature-based solutions 4 years ago, and now it's bioeconomy. So we wonder what other terms are going to come up in the next years. But we assert that these are the things that indigenous peoples are exactly doing, and we are concerned that if we give another name and attach other meanings to it, that it may mean differently, and it might, cause negative impacts or even violation of indigenous people's rights. And then maybe the last thing that I want to say is the leadership and agency of indigenous peoples. Again, if we are talking about economies, and if indigenous peoples do not have a level playing field with a dominant market, with a dominant economy, what does it mean in terms of their leadership and agency to define the kind of economy, to define the kind of development that they want for their people and their communities? So, yeah, thank you very much, Eileen.
Thank you.
Now it's your turn to ask a question.
Yeah, well, very good. Thank you. Well, I thank you for both of you really for highlighting the critical element of the whole discussion and the way the market, the scientists, the economists really twist a particular element to suit a particular environment and particular market forces, so to speak. So, Eileen, my question really in this discussion, what do you propose or what do you suggest for indigenous people to be more feasible, to be able to engage, and to be able to control and benefit from what we call the bioeconomy? What are some of the elements that are necessary to be put in place by indigenous peoples and their collaborators to ensure that they are not spectators of the bioeconomy, but basically they are major actors? Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph, for your question. I think that's one of the big challenge that we have, how we're going to turn from this idea that indigenous people are beneficiaries of process to turn partner in all this process. And when we talk about bioeconomy, we were discussing earlier with Helen about this. We say, okay, this is the daily life of indigenous people. Bioeconomy is what we do every day. And you say we extract resources from the forest, from the mangroves. Yeah. And why now is this new concept that it's like we say relabeling the way of life of indigenous people. And when people talk about the economy in indigenous people territories, they normally say this is a non-economy system, indigenous people. That's what they say most of the time. Maybe we don't agree completely. But anyway, how we can be more active or more proactive in all this process, I think one of the first things is recognize that indigenous people have been doing these activities in their land and their territories, and they're using in a more sustainable way the resources. So for those other actors that are involved in this process, recognize that we have experience, we have knowledge around the management of our territories. Because when I heard bioeconomy, also I think in the management of the territory that in my community is organized by areas where people live this spirituality, where people produce, where people live, where they work together. So all this is part of the bioeconomy in front of the society. And so I say, first part of everything is recognize that we have been doing this for centuries. The second one, and I think we have been calling this in different space, is active and effective participation of this process. So we don't want to be, as we say, only beneficiaries, or we want to be partners and active actors of all this. So is to be part also. If there is going to be a project around this new term of bioeconomy, well, we should be part of the decision-making process. And it's not only one part, it's to be in an entire governance of action that are going to affect our territories related to the bioeconomy. And the other thing, and I think is important, is recognize that this bioeconomy have to be defined with a right-based approach.
Yeah, like
So this right-based approach should also take like a minimum standard, the on-grid, that indigenous people have the right to self-determination, to define how they see this bioeconomy, to define how they want this action in their land territories. And also, I think we came back to the free, prior, and informed consent in all these issues. So, and I think free, prior, and informed consent should be part of the entire process. Should be not only a right, but also should be a tool for learning. So it should be a tool to monitor, to see if their things are working well or not, and redefines new action if things are not going well. And I think that should be the view of bioeconomy working with indigenous people, because we are not only talking about a natural area. It's an area that indigenous people have been shaped for centuries. So bioeconomy is working because we have been shaping the ecosystem where we live for centuries. Thank you. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you, Joseph, Eileen, and Eileen. Yeah, so 3 things for me. Human rights-based, free, prior, and informed consent, and recognition that indigenous peoples have the capacity, have the agency, and have been practicing this bioeconomy. And so if there's something that the market should learn from, it's from the bioeconomy that indigenous peoples have been practicing for centuries. So thank you very much.
thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you. We'll give it a point.